Ladies and gentlemen, he didn't leave a note. He didn't take his phone. One day he walked out of his house, and then he was gone. No struggle, no witnesses, no body. The case was labeled a mystery, then slowly buried under time. For 7 long years, his name stayed on missing person lists, while his family lived between hope and grief. The disappearance happened without warning, and that was what made it so unsettling. There was no argument, no suspicious phone call, no packed bag hidden in the closet. He woke up that morning and followed his normal routine. He had breakfast, checked his messages, and left the house wearing the same clothes he wore every other day. To anyone watching, it looked ordinary. That ordinariness would later become the most disturbing detail of all. When hours passed and he didn't return, his family assumed a delay. Traffic, overtime, a dead phone battery, normal excuses that comfort the mind. But as evening turned into night, concern hardened into fear. His phone went straight to voicemail. Text messages remained unread. By midnight, panic had fully set in, and the police were called. Investigators arrived expecting a typical missing person case. They searched the house first, looking for signs of a struggle or preparation. There were none. His wallet was still on the table. His keys were missing, but that meant nothing, he always took them. His car remained parked where it always was. That single detail raised the first red flag. If he planned to leave, why not take the car? If he was taken, where did it happen? Neighbors were questioned. No one had seen anything unusual. No screams. No unfamiliar vehicles. No one remembered the exact moment he left. Security cameras on nearby homes showed nothing useful, just empty streets and passing shadows. It was as if he had stepped outside and vanished into thin air. Police traced his last phone signal. It pinged once near his neighborhood and then went silent. No movement. No trail. Digital forensics offered no comfort either. His bank accounts showed no unusual withdrawals. His social media activity stopped completely. No messages sent, no logins, no online footprint. In the modern world, where people leave digital traces everywhere, his absence was almost unnatural. Friends were questioned next. Some described him as quiet but reliable. Others said he had seemed distracted in recent weeks, though no one could point to a clear reason. There were no known enemies, no criminal history, no debts that suggested foul play. He wasn't the kind of person who simply ran away. That made the case harder, not easier. Search teams combed nearby areas. Woods, abandoned buildings, construction sites, nothing. Dogs picked up a scent briefly, then lost it. Investigators debated theories: voluntary disappearance, abduction, accidental death. Each theory collapsed under scrutiny. There was no evidence to support any of them. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. The case grew cold. Media coverage slowed, then stopped. Posters faded on telephone poles. Life continued for everyone except the people who loved him. For them, time froze at the moment he failed to come home. What made the case especially haunting was the lack of a beginning. Most crime stories start with an event, a scream, a body, a crime scene. This one started with nothing. No trigger. No moment to point to and say, this is where it went wrong. That absence gnawed at investigators. It suggested planning, but there was no proof. It suggested randomness, but that felt impossible. As years passed, the file gathered dust. New detectives reviewed it occasionally, hoping fresh eyes might spot something missed. They didn't. Every review ended the same way: unanswered questions and frustration. His name remained on a list of the missing, a reminder that some disappearances defy logic. The most troubling thought lingered quietly in the background. For someone to vanish so completely, either they were extraordinarily unlucky, or extraordinarily careful. And without a single piece of physical evidence, there was no way to know which one was true. The silence that followed his disappearance was heavier than any noise could have been. In the first few weeks, there was constant movement: phone calls, police visits, search teams, questions from reporters. But once those efforts slowed, a different kind of quiet settled in. A long, suffocating quiet that stretched day after day, year after year. For his family, time split into 2 parts: before he went missing, and everything after. Birthdays passed with an empty chair at the table. Holidays arrived without his voice in the room. Every knock on the door sparked a surge of hope, only to end in disappointment. Every unknown phone number felt like it might finally be him. It never was. The police kept the case open, but open didn't mean active. Leads dried up. Tips stopped coming in. Detectives were reassigned to newer cases with clearer evidence and higher chances of resolution. His file remained, but it became thinner with each passing year. No updates, no progress, just dates marking when the case was reviewed again and again. 7 years is a long time to live without answers. In that time, people changed. His parents aged visibly under the weight of uncertainty. Friends married, moved away, started new lives. Some stopped bringing him up, not out of cruelty, but because the subject hurt too much. Others clung to his memory, refusing to accept any outcome without proof. What made the silence unbearable was its ambiguity. Death, as painful as it is, brings a kind of finality. Disappearance offers none. There was no funeral, no grave, no moment of closure. He existed in a strange state between being alive and dead. Legally, emotionally, psychologically, nothing was resolved. Every year, the same questions resurfaced. Had he chosen this? Was he suffering somewhere? Did he want to be found? Or had something terrible happened within minutes of leaving his home? With no evidence, every possibility remained open, and that openness became its own form of torture. Investigators quietly admitted the case was one of the strangest they had seen. People usually leave traces, financial activity, sightings, rumors. He left nothing. It was as if he had stepped outside the boundaries of modern life entirely. No one could explain how a person could disappear so completely in a world saturated with cameras, data, and surveillance. Occasionally, a tip would come in. A possible sighting in another state. A man who looked like him at a bus station. A rumor from someone who knew a guy. Each time, hope would flare briefly, only to be extinguished when the lead went nowhere. These moments were almost crueler than the silence itself. As the years passed, the case became a quiet legend among local investigators, a reminder that not every mystery has an answer waiting. New detectives would hear about it during late-night shifts, spoken of in lowered voices. 7 years, they'd say. No trace at all. For his family, the silence wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the absence of certainty. They learned to live with unanswered questions, but they never learned to accept them. Every day that passed without news was another day suspended between hope and despair. By the time the 7th year arrived, most people believed the story was over. Not solved, just finished. Another missing person lost to time. No one expected the silence to break. And yet, somewhere, the truth had been waiting patiently, hidden not in evidence or witnesses, but in something far more fragile. A voice. When the voice note finally surfaced, it didn't arrive with flashing lights or official announcements. It came quietly, almost casually, as if it didn't understand the weight it carried. One moment, the case was a forgotten file, the next, it was breathing again. 7 years of silence were interrupted by a sound no one was prepared to hear. At first, there was disbelief. People questioned whether it was real, whether it could be a mistake or a cruel hoax. Technology had changed in 7 years. Voices could be edited, fabricated, manipulated. Investigators approached it with caution, knowing that hope could cloud judgment. But the family recognized it instantly. The tone, the pauses, the way certain words were stressed, it was him. There was no hesitation in their reaction, only shock. The voice note wasn't long. It didn't explain everything. In fact, it raised more questions than it answered. His voice sounded older, strained, as if it carried the weight of years spent under pressure. There was no clear location mentioned, no date, no direct explanation of what had happened to him or where he had been. But what mattered most was simple and undeniable: he was alive at the time it was recorded. That single fact changed everything. Investigators reopened the case with renewed urgency. What had once been treated as a cold case was now active again. Old evidence was re-examined, timelines were rebuilt, and people who had been questioned years ago were called back in. The voice note became the centerpiece of the investigation, analyzed repeatedly by experts searching for clues hidden in background noise, breathing patterns, and word choice. Every second of audio was dissected. Analysts listened for traffic sounds, echoes, or environmental hints that could suggest a location. Linguists studied his speech, noting changes that might indicate stress, isolation, or coercion. Even the silence between words was considered important. In crime stories, silence often speaks as loudly as words. Public interest exploded. The story spread quickly, pulling in people who had never heard of the case before. Tips poured in from across the country. Some were useless, some misleading, but a few were unsettling enough to demand serious attention. The voice note had transformed the case from a mystery of absence into a mystery of survival. For the family, the emotional impact was overwhelming. Relief clashed with fear. Knowing he had been alive meant there was hope, but it also meant he had endured 7 years of something unknown. Every night, they replayed the message, searching for hidden meaning. Was he asking for help? Was he being watched while recording it? Was it a goodbye, or a signal that he believed rescue was finally possible? Investigators had to consider darker possibilities. The controlled tone of his voice raised concerns. Was he speaking freely, or was someone forcing him to say just enough to prove he was alive, but not enough to reveal the truth? In criminal cases, messages like these are rarely accidental. They are often the result of pressure, negotiation, or desperation. The voice note didn't close the case, it reopened old wounds and created new ones. It proved that the past 7 years hadn't been empty after all. Something had been happening in the shadows, unseen and unheard. And now that sound had finally escaped. In crime stories, evidence usually comes in the form of documents, images, or physical objects. But sometimes, a voice is the most powerful evidence of all. Because a voice carries fear, hope, and truth in ways nothing else can. And once that voice was heard, the silence that had protected the truth for 7 long years was gone. As the investigation moved forward, one unsettling question refused to disappear: why now? 7 years had passed without a single confirmed sign of life, and then suddenly, a voice note emerged. Timing matters in crime stories, and this timing felt deliberate. Investigators knew that messages like this don't surface randomly. Someone, somewhere, made a decision that changed the course of the case. The digital trail became just as important as the voice itself. Experts traced metadata, upload paths, and device histories, trying to understand how the recording traveled from an unknown place to the outside world. Even a small technical mistake by the sender could reveal a location, a network, or a connection. In modern crime investigations, technology often becomes the silent witness. But there was a problem. The voice note had clearly been handled with care. It lacked obvious digital fingerprints, suggesting that whoever sent it understood how tracking works, or had help from someone who did. That raised the possibility of organized involvement. This wasn't just a man who had gone missing, this was a man who might have been controlled, hidden, or used for reasons still unknown. The content of the message itself added to the tension. He didn't ask directly for help. He didn't accuse anyone. He spoke in a way that felt measured, almost rehearsed. To seasoned investigators, that was alarming. In cases involving captivity or coercion, victims often avoid direct statements to protect themselves from immediate harm. Every carefully chosen word hinted at fear behind the calm. Law enforcement began looking into people connected to his life before he disappeared. Business dealings, personal relationships, unresolved conflicts, everything was back on the table. The voice note suggested that the past hadn't stayed buried. Someone from his old life might still have a grip on his present. Media attention intensified the pressure. True crime communities analyzed the audio frame by frame, slowing it down, isolating background sounds, and debating every theory imaginable. While some speculation helped bring in new leads, other theories created noise and confusion. In high-profile crime stories, the truth often has to fight its way through misinformation. Behind the scenes, investigators faced a race against time. If the voice note was recent, he could still be alive, but that also meant he could be moved, silenced, or worse. Every delay increased the risk. Surveillance was quietly placed on key individuals. Financial records were monitored. Travel patterns were scrutinized. The case had shifted from solving a disappearance to preventing a potential murder. For the family, hope became a double-edged sword. The idea that he had survived for 7 years was almost impossible to process. At the same time, the fear of losing him again, this time permanently, was unbearable. They lived between hope and dread, knowing that every new development could either save him or confirm their worst fears. In crime stories, there is often a moment when everything changes. The voice note was that moment. It didn't provide answers, but it proved that the truth was still alive, hiding somewhere in the dark. It exposed the illusion that the case was over. Someone had wanted the world to hear that voice, even if only briefly. And once a voice breaks through silence, it cannot be unheard. It demands answers. It forces secrets into the light. Whether it leads to rescue, revelation, or tragedy, one thing is certain: that voice note didn't just change the investigation, it changed the fate of everyone involved. In the end, this case reminds us that in the world of crime, the smallest detail can hold the greatest truth. 7 years of silence, unanswered questions, and cold leads were all shattered by one fragile, fleeting sound, a voice that refused to be ignored. It proved that even when evidence is hidden, even when time tries to erase a person from the story, the truth has a way of reaching those who are listening. As investigators pieced together every clue, and as the family clung to hope against impossible odds, one fact became clear: some mysteries aren't solved by sight, by touch, or by evidence alone, they are solved by listening closely, by hearing what others can't. And so, the question lingers, chilling and unresolved for now: what happened in those 7 years, and who, or what, was waiting on the other end of that voice?